Meet Christopher Marquez, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He's the one on the left. Marquez did a couple of deployments in Iraq, including the nastiest business we had going on at the time in Fallujah. Here's a photo of Marquez after he went into a house where one of his fellow soldiers, a member of his band of brothers, was wounded during an ambush. Marquez and another guy went in, pulled him out. This is in the middle of the combat. Guys like Marquez don't expect a lot of recognition or credit for doing what they were trained to do, but we gave him the Bronze Star. You can bet he has a lot more medals besides that. So he's been in and out of the hairiest places on this planet. And he made it back in one piece, made it out alive, made it out unscathed. He wasn't as fortunate when he went into McDonald's in Washington, D.C. just a couple days ago. He's in there ordering a burger when a bunch of black people come in and start asking him, taunting him, harassing him, yelling at him, threatening him. Do Black Lives Matter? Do Black Lives Matter? When he would not play their little game, they started calling him a racist. He sat down, ate his burger, and left when he was attacked by this mob of black people. He was knocked out and robbed. The Daily Caller was the only one that really did a story on this. The Daily Caller out of Washington, D.C. He told the Daily Caller that I believe this was a hate crime and I was targeted because of my skin color. He said, quote, too many of these types of attacks have been happening against white people by members of the black community, and the majority of the mainstream media refuses to report on it. Well observed, Sergeant Marquez. Let's take a minute, though, also to look at this story from the Daily Caller. Listen, the Daily Caller, they've written nice things about me. They've given my books good reviews. So you would think, that they set a pretty high bar, I think, for other places to report on this kind of racial violence. But this story was just full of timidity, and there's no. Well, let me just show you what I'm talking about. The first paragraph, of the story, it mentions the word allegedly, an alleged attack. Okay, whatever. But then they mentioned the word allegedly in the second paragraph and the third paragraph. Then Marquez talked about how he went to the hospital to be treated for eye wounds to his injuries to his head and to his eyes. The Daily Caller asked to see the hospital bills to verify it. Then they talked to the people in the police department about the attack, and again they referred to it as an alleged attack, even though by this point the people at McDonald's actually showed Marquez, and I think the Daily Caller Foundation, or at least the guy from McDonald's, talked about what was on. And here's a reader comment in the Daily Caller section where somebody talks about another veteran who was killed a couple of years ago. We do a lot of reporting out of Washington, D.C. And in the last 6 months, last year, there's been a lot of There's been a lot of the white yuppie type, the white civil servant type, getting beaten, killed, whether it's on the metro, whether it's just a few steps outside of the doorway or the condo, the townhouse of the neighborhood they tell all their friends is oh so safe. So that's why reporting on Washington, D.C. is important, because really there's just so much violence, so many public officials and reporters who ignore, deny, condone, excuse, encourage, and even lie about it. Everybody back there is so heavily invested in not telling the truth about black criminality and black on white crime. And so I can see why the Daily Caller would be a little cautious in reporting this. But really, if you're going to report this stuff, you really got to do two things. One, you have to report boldly. And two, you really have to connect the dots. Because this guy, this Marine vet, even as courageous as important as he is, him getting assaulted at McDonald's is not a story unless it's part of a bigger pattern. Hey, listen, I understand the first and only rule of journalism, which is if your mother says she loves you, check it out. I'm all down with that. But while you're doing the navel gazing thing, trying to be extra careful about this story, you're telegraphing the thing. You're telegraphing another message that you probably don't want to telegraph, which is, I'm afraid to write about this because there's so much of it going on. I don't want anybody beating me up for it. Well, you know what? Instead of questioning Sergeant Marquez about his story in McDonald's, maybe you should have been questioning him about his experiences in Fallujah, where we all could learn some bravery in just our everyday lives. A sculptor in Wyoming was so inspired by this photograph of Sergeant Marquez that he did a sculpture. These three guys coming out of that building under fire. The guy in the middle, the sergeant in the middle, carrying his gun in one hand and his K-bar knife in the other. That statue is now on display at Camp Pendleton as a model for how Marines are supposed to behave under the most difficult circumstances. Because if the circumstances are not difficult, they're not going to send in the Marines. We're lucky to have men like this in this country. Yeah, we send him into McDonald's, and he has to be subject to this relentless racial violence, and worse, he has to be subject to this relentless denial that anything's going on in Washington, D.C. that's maybe a little bit on the weird side. You know, the guys that come out of the combat zones, Marlon Newbern is one of them. Our psychologists we rely on a lot here. You know, whenever Marlon starts speaking the truth about the level of racial violence and how really bad it is and how really sick a lot of it is, the black on white violence and the black mob violence, Marlon always poses the question, well, what are they going to do to me? Send me back to Vietnam? I don't think so, Marlon. So Sergeant Marquez has the same kind of attitude, which is, hey, I'm going to tell the truth about this because I've been in a lot hairier situations like this, and telling the truth about racial violence is nothing compared to that. Well, maybe that's a lesson that you and I could learn as well. Maybe that's a lesson that reporters in Washington, D.C. and all over the country could learn. Suck it up a little. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Connect the dots about the enormity of black on white racial hostility that is doing so much damage in this country. Instead, we turn on the TV and we hear Hillary and Bernie talk about how black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything.
African American parents shouldn't have to worry that their children will be harassed, humiliated, even shot because of the color of their skin.
I want to see an America where when young black men walk down the street, they will not be harassed by police officers.
We know the numbers. We know the black crime rate is 3, 5, 10, 20, 100, 1,000 times the white crime rate. Multiply that number by 10, and that's the black versus Asian crime rate. Yet we get Hillary and Bernie out there saying the only reason that's happening is because police are picking on black people for no reason whatsoever. Well, I think Sergeant Marquez straightened them out on that. So if you guys are ever down in D.C., check out some of the war memorials. Some of them are very inspirational. But if you're going to go into McDonald's and grab a burger in one of D.C.'s black neighborhoods, just remember one thing. Don't make the black kids angry.